Hello, my soccer universe. My name is Roland, and this is Football Talk. We, of course, are reviewing the main action over the past weekend all over Europe with special deep dives into the Austrian Bundesliga and Serie A, the two teams that I'm watching most closely. It was a mixed weekend for me. Milan won against Lecce, although Lecce is a relegation candidate, that much is for certain. So, not sure what to really think about that win, but at least 3 points. And, also the other Milan team managed to suffer home loss. Inter lost to Udinese, and if you're watching this on YouTube, I'm wearing a Udinese jersey. They were the top performers on this past weekend, according to my model, among the teams that I have in my collection. Telstar being even better, so look out for that in the review around Europe for that result. LASK, on the other hand, suffered a devastating loss. They should have won this game easily in the derby against Ried. Did not happen, and that really hurts. We'll mention about that as well. I will also talk a little bit about transfer dealings, all sprinkled throughout this episode. I honestly have to tell you, I do not like deadline day deals for the simple reason they're usually bad deals. It usually doesn't work out, and even a big signing like Isak for Liverpool, I'm not sure if this will in the end work out. It's usually bad planning if it has to go all the way down to the deadline, although I think in this Isak deal this might not really apply, but it will apply for many other deals. I personally prefer a good structure behind any transfer approach. And yeah, transfers usually, if you're a team like Milan who got in many players in and many players out, this usually means the squad is not settled. It's not a good strategy. And that's why I really don't like the transfer window all that much. But I will mention the most transfers. Of course, what we can already say is that we have now a Super League. And no, it's not a Super League that was floundered. It is the Premier League. They outspent everyone. And have you seen the bleeding from the Bundesliga into the Premier League? The Bundesliga looks completely different. Bayern Munich were a giant of the European game. They are more or less in tatters because, yes, they get still some big players, but mostly are outbid for Premier League. And when they get someone, remember Sadio Mane, that did not work out as well. So Bayern reeling, but most of the Bundesliga is reeling as well. They also had the craziest sacking that I've seen in a long time. We'll talk about that too. Speaking of Premier League as a Super League, it's to the point that Premier League rejects are now going to Serie A to, either revive their career or set their son end the career in the sun in Italy. And they're really performing well. It just has me worried. And that the Italian league cannot keep the Italian talents but get the Premier League rejects is something that really bothers me and tells also a lot about the current state of the Premier League and all the other leagues as well. Lastly, I want to mention two things that I will definitely talk about in this episode. It's, of course, the big win for PSG. Some great goals in there. Also a record broken in Ligue 1 for second half scoring. And, of course, we had the big match in Portugal with a huge win for Porto as well. So, let's start our journey throughout Europe. Well, let's start our journey in the Austrian Bundesliga as usual, and at the game that I was at, the big Upper Austrian derby between LASK and Ried. After 25 minutes, LASK should have led by 2, if not 3 goals. They created so many chances, one-on-one with goalkeepers. And yes, there were some real chances there. There were some chances where you didn't see your teammate that could have tapped the ball in, or other chances where, you have to get a better shot off. And it comes as it always comes in these serious situations. There's a corner that was probably not even a corner that then results in a penalty call for a hands penalty, which is one of those that I hate these hands penalties. But I know by the rules they probably are. And Ried out of nowhere don't know what they're doing. Lead 1-0, and then just a minute later there's a defensive error. This is something that LASK has been struggling with all season long, and it's 2-0. Out of nowhere, absolutely out of nowhere. Game more or less done, or was it? I actually thought the way that they were playing, and it was not bad, they might come back. However, Ried makes it 3, then finally a goal for LASK, and that was that. They proceeded to hit 3 times more the woodwork. They already did so in the first half, although probably would have been offside. So it was a rather unlucky afternoon for LASK. But keep on working. keep on working. If you look at the other results, we had Blau-Weiß Linz picking up their first point of the season and also scoring their first 2 goals, 2 beautiful goals by Simon Seidel, and they were really hard done by because they also gave away a penalty, by hand penalty, that caused quite some uproar. The ball was more or less close to the body, however the hand was stretched out. I can potentially see why this is given, but I would be also really annoyed if this was given against me. Sturm Graz win the Graz Derby, not because they were so much of a better team. Yes, they are the better team, there's no doubt about that, but GRK again scored the goals themselves. I have to say, I mean, the first one, a really bad back pass where the keeper, because of the floodlights, doesn't really see where the ball is coming and Jota can get it over the line. The other goal, also a slight deflection where they didn't look good in the third goal also. And then there was a red card in there. Yeah, GRK, it has been an issue with them ever since they got promoted. They caused themselves too many goals conceded. That's probably the best way to put it. Then on Sunday, Austria Vienna get their first win of the season, a 1-0 over Altach in a game really not much to talk home about. However, the one thing is the young guys, 2 19-years, they combine after a corner kick to make it 1-0. Not much coming from Altach, a little bit disappointing as well, but the game overall was disappointing. Rapid get a 1-0 away win at Hartberg. Why do I say away win? Well, Hartberg had to play at Admira's Stadium in the Südstadt, which is just south of Vienna, just outside of the city limits, because their own stadium is being renovated. And I gotta say, I mean, if you're so close to Vienna, the stadium was full of Rapid fans, and yeah, for once the stadium is sold out, because this is a rare sight in Austria. But yeah, was a little bit weird. Rapid missed many chances very late on. A nice corner combination again to the near corner, and Kara heads it in. And then there was a great start between VSG and Wolfsburg, a Wolfsburg team that was so unlucky getting eliminated in the Europa League. Well, I guess they deserved it. No, not in the Conference League. I guess they deserved it because they didn't play well. However, it was on penalties. Different story. Pink, who missed the penalty, actually scores the opening goal after 2 minutes, but just a minute later, Berkeley gets the equalizer, and that was that. There was not much coming. I think VSG probably a teeny bit better. And so now in the standings, and after 5 rounds, I maybe permit that we can look at the standings already. We have now Rapid leading for the first time, I think, in 3 or 4 years. Back then it was after 2 rounds, now after 5 rounds. I'm still not sure. There's a lot of euphoria around Rapid, but this was also last season, and I see that there are potentially some defensive frailties that have been exposed in Europe, but also they don't convert their chances. I still don't know. Salzburg is also very much an unfinished team at the moment, and Sturm Graz is also fighting with itself. It speaks a little bit to the fact that the Austrian Bundesliga is a little bit deteriorating, but it might make for a really exciting season. I don't want to look further down the table. LASK is in 10th place, and defensive is not good. The defensive record is absolutely not good, and this is the big problem that LASK have at the moment. Transfer window is open for a few more days in Austria, a week longer, so potentially a defender could come. I'm not sure. I think there's more that needs to be solved there. Well, let's continue our journey in Italy, where Milan finally got the first win of the season and also got some transfers done. We'll mention a little bit about that a little bit later on. However, the weekend started with a thriller. Cremonese beat fellow promoted team Sassuolo 3-2 at home. They had a 2-0 halftime lead through Terracciano and Vasquez, but then Sassuolo came back. Pinamonti and a Berardi penalty made the scores level, and then it seemed like it will stay level. However, they give away a penalty. De Luca scores, and Cremonese have 6 points already. There are only 2 other teams in Serie A with such a great record. Cremonese look very likely to stay up. Very experienced squad, and now they also got Jamie Vardy. I think that's a really interesting transfer. But let's go over to Lecce, where Milan started out really fast, and Gabbia scored a header that was ruled out for a push on the back, and I have to say, yes, maybe 2 hands were on the body, but it was not really a push. How the defender fell over there was not much happening. This is not a goal that's going to be ruled out in many other leagues, I gotta say. First half, yeah, it was not much. I mean, but Jimenez missed a pretty big chance with the rumors that he might exit. We know now that he did not, and I'm actually quite happy about that. Give this guy time. I mean, he entered a very bad situation. Now a little bit his confidence is shot, but give him the confidence. I think there's something there. However, it was in the second half that Milan really ratcheted up the pressure, and it was Modric running the show. Also, Loftus-Cheek looked really good. There was a goal by Jimenez, scored, and I was so happy for him. But again, he was offside. First replay, I saw, this could be tight. Fortunately, it wasn't offside, but then a little bit later, there was a foul that was not a foul given, and a Modric free kick finds Loftus-Cheek in the 66th minute, and it is 1-0 Milan. Then Pulisic uses a defensive error. It was a long kick out that neither of the Lecce defenders could control, and he runs onto goal, and it's 2-0 Milan. I think it was a decent performance. Not too much to talk home about either, because Lecce is probably a team that's gonna get relegated. We gotta be honest about that as well. Then on Saturday, the Como hype train got a little stop. They lose 1-0 at Bologna with Orsolini scoring the decisive goal, while Atalanta again dropped points, this time at Parma. They had a 1-0 lead through Pasalic, and maybe this Atalanta team still has to find itself. I mean, they lost a lot of players, and I still don't know what happened to Lookman. I probably have to look that one up. Patrick Cotrone scores a late equalizer for Parma, a Parma team that again did not offer a whole lot offensively and seemed to be like a good relegation candidate at this moment. Then in the evening, Napoli also didn't show much against Cagliari. And remember, this was the matchup that got Napoli the title last season, or where they secured the title. Really, they had a really hard time breaking them down. However, late on, if we're talking stoppage time, it seems like they were looking for McTominay to be the hero again. And he had 2 chances, but I think this focus on McTominay then actually got them the win, because with the last attack of the evening, it was the Buongiorno cross in, and every one of Cagliari was around McTominay. Anguissa completely forgotten on the penalty spot, more or less, puts it in, and it's 1-0 for Napoli. Wild celebrations, and you could see this was a real team spirit. Everyone was celebrating with them. That's something that Napoli has going for them. That much is for certain. At the same time, Roma also get their second win of the season. 1-0 away win at newly promoted Pisa, with Soule scoring the winning goal in 55th minute and having also a goal disallowed shortly thereafter. But Roma looking actually quite sturdy. I just didn't like their away jerseys, like at all. Those are horrific, if you were to ask me. And then Sunday, the bogey matchup for Juve, although as of late it's not that much anymore. It is a 1-0 away win at Genoa, with Vlahovic scoring the goal. Kostic being on the assist. I didn't even know that Kostic is still at Juventus. Juventus looking actually quite stable overall, and Vlahovic, who has been rumored to exit because he has such high wages, you will hold on to him. He will score goals for you, although probably wouldn't have disliked him at Milan either. Late on, the Genoa hit the crossbar, but Juve were good for that win. Also, really weird jerseys for Juventus. I think Marmite describes it probably best. City rivals Torino only managed a 0-0 draw at home to Fiorentina, or should I say hold on to a 0-0 draw against Fiorentina. Also a game that was a rather meh game. Not too many goals scored in Serie A this weekend, which I think is a little bit sad to see, but I can see, heat, blah, blah, blah. I hope it will pick up, but teams are still finding themselves very much so. And then in the evening, I had the chance between Inter against Udinese and Lazio Hellas Verona, and I decided on the Lazio match because I thought that, Inter again is gonna romp over Udinese. Well, I was wrong. I got the romping. Lazio over Verona. We'll talk about that in a sec. Whereas Inter, yes, they had the 1-0 lead and Thuram completely forgotten in the box, assist and Dumfries, and they were dominant. However, shortly thereafter, they give away a penalty. It was a handball from a short distance. Again, I personally don't like this handball. It was not an unnatural position. If you jump, your arms are out, that's not unnatural. This is a law that I really would like to see changed, and the sooner the better. I don't know what they come up with. And then Davis steps up and it's 1-1, and then Atta, after being assisted by Davis, runs onto goal and is not attacked. Takes a shot a little bit unexpectedly. It's 2-1 Udinese. Yes, Inter is bettering than Udinese in the second half. Di Marco seemingly have given them the equalizer. However, there was also Thuram in an offside position just before, and Inter cannot find the equalizer, and the pitchforks are out already for Christian Chivo. Yes, we know that Christian Chivo is probably too inexperienced to be the coach of Inter, but ride it out or fire him. I think it will probably go the way of the sack, fortunately for Christian Chivo, I would say. And then lastly, Lazio with a pretty convincing 4-0 performance over Hellas Verona. I have to say I'm not very convinced that Hellas Verona will stay in Serie A, and it was very, very early on that Lazio got the job done. Guendouzi and Zaccagni opening scoring, both assisted by Tati Castellanos. Castellanos won, I think a second one was a Rabona assist to add to it. He himself then scores the 3-0, and Bouladia late on makes it 4. This was rather convincing from a side, remember, that had a transfer ban on them, but they looked really fine in this play. Looking at the table, I was wrong before. There are 4 teams now with 6 points after 2 games, but it's Napoli, Juve, Roma. I think 3 teams that you very well could see making it into the top 4. And then Cremonese in there. It's kind of the odd man out. We have to see what Inter and Milan will do. At the moment, it is actually the 3 aforementioned ones plus Inter that are in the top 4, with a very tight one between Napoli and Inter. Milan just sitting on the outside looking in a little bit behind. I have to say, Milan's transfer window can be described brilliant in terms of sales, although I did not necessarily like to see Theo and Tijani Reinders go, but you got a lot of money for that, and you funded a spending spree with that, and also made up for loss of revenue since you didn't qualify for the Champions League. However, what you brought in, I was all for shoring up the midfield, and I liked Ricci, Modric, and then Chashari, who now is out with a broken fibula. Yeah, Santi Jimenez did that too. It's not his time at Milan. But then you didn't get the striker you wanted. You got in Nkunku, which I don't know. Yes, it could be counter-attack with Leao. Maybe Leao will play up the striker up front. But I think Nkunku is also injury-prone, and you didn't really get a defender in, which has me a little bit more worried. If you can dominate midfield, I think this could work out, but I'm not so happy with that transfer window. I think the transfer of the past few days was definitely Jamie Vardy to Cremonese. We talked about it. Overall, I already said it. Napoli had a really brilliant transfer window. Late season deals, I have not seen too many going in Serie A. I think Milan were probably the most active one with getting Rabiot in. I saw that Akanji is now going to Inter instead of Milan. Milan were ahead of him, but I guess he wanted to play Champions League. We gotta see, but yeah, Milan. My expectations for Milan are, you should make top 4, but it's gonna be really tough. Easily the biggest match on the past weekend was the meeting between Liverpool and Arsenal. It was late on Sunday and it grabbed all the headlines, but since it was so early in the season, of course, none of these teams were opening themselves up. And even Liverpool, who have been conceding 2 goals for multiple games in a row, kept it actually tight. Arsenal controlled a little bit more of the first half, Liverpool more of the second half. There was not much happening, and it was headed for the draw that you could already smell. And then Dominic Szoboszlai takes one of the best free kicks, from a center position in the upper corner with a swerve. It's absolute gorgeous stuff. That was worth all the draws and living through all that before. It was worth the entry ticket alone. It's a goal that will live on forever. And then to top it off, Liverpool and their absolutely mad transfer window by signing Isak finally. And yes, they're building for the future, not for the present, I would say. But it's rather impressive what Liverpool have done there. If it will work out this season, that remains to be seen, I also gotta say. If we look at the other results, we had on early Saturday kickoff a very controversial 2-0 win for Chelsea because a Fulham goal was chalked off for a foul, I think close to midfield after a nice roulette, A full Chelsea player got stepped on, and therefore the goal was disallowed. Caused a lot of uproar. I personally haven't seen it, but from how it was described, I can see why people were upset. United bounced back from their loss to Grimsby with a 3-2 home win over Burnley. And it needed a 97th minute penalty by Bruno Fernandes. They held twice the lead, were twice packed back. It just doesn't look good for United, and I'm not sure how long Ruben Amorim will survive, although I have the feeling that he might step down himself before he gets fired, because he is really not happy in this job. We had a big win for Bournemouth at Spurs, dominating Spurs. It's a Spurs team that has been one of the bright points this season, but they were completely outplayed. Evan Nielsen in the 5th minute gives Bournemouth the one goal that secures them the win. Everton also are looking better and better, and Jack Grealish assisted 2 goals in the 3-2 win at Wolves. Had a 3-1 lead, as I said. The first and the third goal assisted by Jack Grealish, who finally can shine again. Other remarkable result was Brighton coming back against Manchester City. A Manchester City team that probably should have scored more goals. When Holland alone had plenty of chances, especially in the first half, to have a bigger than just a 1-0 lead. And then with a James Milner penalty, the whole game turns around. And then it was actually Trafford who put in quite some few good saves. But in the 89th minute, Gruda steps past him. It was a really nice goal, and Brighton wins that one. City already 2 losses in the first 3 games. However, Donnarumma seems to be coming now. That is a transfer that I'm really wanting to see how it will work out, to be honest. And then we had the late game between Villa and Crystal Palace, where Palace again win at Villa. Huge. Villa also having a rather slow start to this season. Moving over to Holland, we had actually quite a remarkable round with some surprise results. Volendam, newly promoted team, managed a 1-1 against Ajax with Veerman scoring a beautiful goal already in the 16th minute. Yes, Ajax more of the game, more chances, but they only could manage an equalizer by Itakura, new signing, assisted by Wout Weghorst. However, PSV, the champions, even had it worse, losing 2-0 at home to Telstar. Owusu scoring in the 21st and Abrawa in the 65th minute for a famous win, which means that the two of the big 3 have lost. So Feyenoord, who have also a game less, had the chance to have a perfect record, and they go to Sparta Rotterdam, local derby, where Sam Stein, now Feyenoord captain, meets his father, who is the coach of Sparta Rotterdam. It was always going to be Feyenoord in that one. It's a very one-sided rivalry. Bosch in the 29th minute opens the scoring. Ueda 48, 2-0. Then Martins Indy is sent off. That's a name that we can recognize. Ueda adds another one, and Twin Timber as well. Stein did not score against his father's team. And then there were a few other results. Twente losing at Excelsior, another Rotterdam team, is not really expected, but then Utrecht and AZ, 2 of the European contenders for the Netherlands, get wins. Cup winners Go Ahead Eagles again drop points, this time in a 2-2 draw at Herrenveen. The big story in the Bundesliga is that's how many players are being sold away to the Premier League and probably are not even doing that well, but also that Erik ten Hag already got the sack, but more on that in a little bit. We actually had quite an atmospheric game Friday evening. HSV against St. Pauli, the Hamburg derby, and it was everything that you would expect. However, a very unlucky game if you're an HSV fan, because they were dominating at first, but then Dźwigala with the first real attack by St. Pauli gave them the 1-0 lead. Then they got the equalizer early in the second half, was ruled out for an offside, and then Hutonji makes it shortly after 2-0 for St. Pauli, who are the slightly more experienced side. But it was a really interesting match, did not go St. Pauli's way. Frankfurt meanwhile continued their really good start to the season. Yes, they've lost Ekitike and so on and so forth, but they got Rizzo Doan, who scores a brace at Hoffenheim. Özil in the 51st makes it 3-0, so it was a rather easy 3-1 away win, with the goal for Hoffenheim coming in garbage time. But as I already said, the big story was, of course, Bayer Leverkusen again dropping points, despite having a 2-goal lead and a man more in the 64th minute when Schick converted a penalty. However, Schmidt and Koulibaly equalized. And then Erik ten Hag, I said it already, got the sack after only 2 match days. And to be honest, I think this is not necessarily based on the results only. There must have been something going on behind the scenes as well. I hear that Erik ten Hag was not very well liked. There were quite some disagreements with the club leadership. Still, it's a rather poor record for Bayer Leverkusen. And of course, Bayer Leverkusen have lost plenty of players. Florian Wirtz, Granit Xhaka, all these stalwarts from the championship season. So really not a good sign, and it might point that Bayer Leverkusen might have a hard time in this Bundesliga season. Bayern, meanwhile, again a little bit leaky on the back. I mean, they had an easy 3-0 lead at Augsburg. Gnabry, Diaz and Olise scoring. Diaz even having one of the misses of the season. And then Augsburg pulled 2 back, and Bayern do hang on to remain top of the table and with the perfect record. But Bayern might definitely be the class of the league, but they still can be gotten at. Other results that I want to point out is Leipzig getting the first win after being trounced by Bayern on the first day of the season. Stuttgart also bouncing back with a win over Gladbach. Dortmund 3-0 over Union Berlin. And Köln, newly promoted Köln, second win in the second game, 4-1 against Freiburg, having a 4-0 lead. So that's also a rather remarkable result. One thing was for certain, the Liga weekend had goals. Although that's mostly due to 2 games, but all the others had also plenty of goals. I mean, Lens started out with 3-1 win over Brest, but then Lorient against Lille is one of those crazy games. 0-0 at halftime. It was 2-1 in the 64th minute when Lorient pulled one back after a penalty was missed, and then Tosin converts more or less on the rebound. And from the 77th minute on, Lille scored 5 goals, and Olivier Giroud didn't even play in there. So absolute crazy stuff. I think it's even a record. Has never happened before that one team has scored 7 goals in a single half. 8 goals in one half is already pretty crazy. But there was one game that had even more goals. It was PSG's visit to Toulouse, a game that was over after 50 minutes with Joan Neves scoring 2 goals with overhead kicks. One more beautiful than the other. Barcola also getting in on the action, and Neves even scoring the 6th one to complete his hat-trick. Really amazing stuff by PSG, who then of course let it slide a little bit. I mean, Cresswell pulled one back in the 37th minute to make it 1-4. They missed a penalty, and yes, when it was 6-1, Toulouse pulled 2 back in garbage time. Better said that way. But yeah, this was the first really emphatic showing by PSG. Monaco had some harder time, 2 European teams meeting here. They had a 2-0 lead through Akliouche and Balogun. However, then Bakwa and the Panishelli penalty make it 2-2 in short succession, and then I needed a goal by Minamino in stoppage time. It was a goal that you could actually see coming, as Minamino was so left alone in the box. You could only see that he will convert this one. Paris FC get the first win of the season, a 3-2 over Metz, and then the Olympico played. And that one, I had it half watching, and I have to say, OL dominated that one most of the time. They had plenty of goals disallowed or penalties given that then were pulled back. Then Egan Riley sent off in the 29th minute and was only holding on for OM. That it wasn't a Balerdi own goal also fit with that game, because it was a rather a stumbly game, especially for OM. In Portugal, it was of course all about the big clash meeting between Sporting and Porto, the champions, against a team that has been rather disappointing as of late. In addition, Sporting have not lost a home game in over a year. However, that was changed. In the moment where Sporting were pressing to get the go-ahead goal, it was Luc de Jong striking. I didn't even realize that Luc de Jong is playing for Porto right now, so that was a little bit of a surprise. And then William Gomes adds a second one. Porto even scored a third goal, however it was an Perez own goal, and then Sporting were pressing but could not find an equalizer. Huge win for Porto that maybe opens up the title race a little bit for them as well. On the next day then, Benfica got a 2-1 away win at Alverca. Yes, they had a 2-0 halftime lead, then Dedic is sent off. He already scored the second goal as well, and in stoppage Gui pulls one back, but Benfica stay well and they have a game in hand, whereas Braga have to salvage a 2-2 draw at Rio Ave, being twice down. Santa Clara, team that got eliminated in Conference League qualifying, also only a 0-0 draw, and Vitoria also not really getting it going. And let's finish in La Liga, where Atletico Madrid continued their absolutely horrendous start. Only 2 points after 3 games. Never has a Diego Simeone team started as badly. And probably this lost point. It's the worst of them all. They had even lead through Giovanni Simeone. However, Vicente with a penalty puts it back to 1-1, and then Alaves were closer to the win. We also had a first win for Real Oviedo against the Real Sociedad. A Real Sociedad team that has also bleeding talent, especially to the Premier League. And so there's not much left. I mean, they will probably finish lower mid-table, something like that. The goal came in the 40th minute when a Hassan run was more or less taking the ball away from their own box, but he goes and then cuts inside and finds Dendonka, who gets the winning goal for Real Oviedo. So on the return, third game of the season, they finally get a win. Sevilla also get a pretty huge win at Girona, a team that I really feel is going to get relegated very soon. Sevilla then also lose, of course, Luque Bacchio. However, they replace him with Alexis Sanchez and some other old guys. So, really, really weird stuff. Real Madrid had plenty of goals disallowed, so enough for the Madrid media to start some hysteria. However, they get the 2-1 win despite being down 1-0 to a Murici goal. The turnaround 37th and 38th, so in very quick succession, Arda Güler and Vini Jr. scoring. Celta Vigo and Villarreal, two teams that play in Europe. 1-1 draw, maybe a little bit more for Villarreal. Nicolas Pepe, another, I did not realize that he's now at Villarreal, opens the scoring. However, Borja Iglesias in stoppage time gets the equalizer for Celta Vigo team that has been pressing but also had a so-and-so start to the season. Another meeting between Europa League and Champions League starters. Real Betis against Athletic Club. Athletic Club win that one. Had a 2-0 lead. Late Bacampo pulls one back, but it was an own goal by Bartra and a Paredes scoring for Athletic Club. But there's consolation for Betis. You got Anthony from United for a relatively cheap price but high salary. I mean, this was stretching for Betis and probably a big loss for United, who just got rid of one of the worst signings ever. However, he did really well at Betis last season. Espanyol continued their good start to the season with a 1-0 over Osasuna, and then Barcelona should probably have lost at Rayo. Rayo really outplayed them, especially in the second half. Barca had the lead through a Yamal penalty. However, VAR was not working in the first half. It was probably not a penalty. So really weird scenes, but it also speaks to the state of the stadium in Vallecas. Perez gets the equalizer. As I said, Rayo probably should have won that one. So this adds a little journey through Europe. I was actually hoping to get this episode out a little bit sooner. However, personal commitments, family work, etc. didn't really allow me to get it out sooner. And those things always take priority and will always take priority for me. At least I got it out after deadline day, and I don't care about deadline day, but I could at least talk a little bit about that. But it's still staggering how the Premier League is outspending everyone and how teams like Sunderland are outspending huge teams in Germany, France, Spain, Italy. This is something that is just out of whack. And yeah, I wonder if the Super League would have been launched a little bit smarter. Could this have prevented the Premier League pulling away so much? I don't know. But that's food for thought, I would say. Any case, please leave me comments below, give me reviews, anything, all the good stuff. Also, talk to others if you really like this podcast for sure. Give me a subscription and I will talk to you soon about more things in my soccer universe. Bye!